Going live, but now we're live. All right, so hello everybody. Welcome back to Talking About Survivor. I'm Christiana Ellis.
I'm Mike Mateen.
I'm gesturing to your little icon on the screen as though that will be what people watching this will see, but it's not the case. Anyway.
I'm going to my notes, that's why I can't see what you're doing.
Well, so we're recording this on a later day than usual, just due to scheduling difficulties that happen sometimes. But I'm glad we got a chance to go ahead and do it before the next episode comes around. You know, we've had to skip sometimes in the past, but you know, we want to do each one. Although I have to say, if we were going to skip an episode so far, this might have been the one. I don't know. I mean, it wasn't bad, but I just mean it was not as exciting as some of the others this season have been, I think.
No, it was fine.
Mm. Although missing the mix-up, I suppose, would be confusing if you actually missed this episode.
Oh, yeah, if you actually didn't watch this episode of the show, yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. I think we talked last time in our podcast that it felt early for a mix-up. I don't know. I guess I don't know. I felt like there were still dynamics to be explored in the tribes the way they were, but I guess it's interesting in the new configuration too, especially since you had that by luck fallout of 3 intact couples and 1 single person on one tribe, and then the reverse on the other tribe.
Yeah.
And I mean, it had to just be dumb luck. I mean, because they were pulling them out of a bag. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It did seem like it was luck. It ended up setting up a new interesting dynamic. I was fine with it.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like that part. I did like about it was the new. It prompted new discussion. It wasn't operating under the same. Yeah, there were still some dynamics to be explored, but we kind of knew where everything was starting to go, and now everything was restarted.
Yeah.
We're back now in the same position, I think, that we were last episode, which is if Dale's tribe loses, Dale is next to go. It's like delayed Dale by like a week.
Yeah. I was a little surprised that they went ahead and targeted Kelly this time instead of Dale, since it seems like it was Dale that they actually had the most problem with.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to talk through why we think that was the why they did that,
Mm-hmm.
and whether or not it had idle implications came into play, or what they were thinking. Because they did split the vote, correct?
I believe so. Yes. Yeah, they did.
So there was that concern whether that prompted why they chose her over him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It will be interesting to discuss what we think what were the reasons behind the choice made by John and Jacqueline, since at least the episode really set it up as though it was them making that decision.
Yep.
Anyway, we started off the episode with John, and we discover that the preview from last time was very misleading because he is not mad at all. Not quite the contrary. He is in full apology and damage control mode.
Oh.
Which I was really glad to see, because I think we talked last time about how I was kind of worried that if he was going to be mad about it, that would be incredibly damaging to his game. But turned out, nope, that's not exactly what it was at all. And they took a 4-second clip and repurposed it to make it appear completely different than it actually played out. I'm shocked. These previews have always been, pillars of, trustworthiness and accuracy. Anyway, so I was actually very happy to see, though, that how he really was taking it, which was, of course, he was surprised, but he was very much on the idea of, I need to not end up on the outside here as the sole remaining ally of the guy who just got voted out. So let's work my way back in and not be mad. And I thought that was great. And then I actually also liked Jeremy. I say I liked it. I liked parts of it, but then I was a little uncomfortable with parts too, where Jeremy was basically saying he feels good that he's in a position where he is able to either accept that apology or not, as he sees fit. And I liked his awareness of that, and I thought it was kind of like a calm, not prideful acceptance of that position. You know what I mean? He's not gloating about it exactly.
Right.
That said, I also kind of wondered a little bit why it had to be such a frame as like an apology. You know what I mean? It's like, it's one thing to say, yeah, I was with Drew, and you guys voted him out, and so now I want to be back with you guys again. But what specifically is he apologizing for?
Probably for being friends with Drew, who was a douchebag.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, that might be it. It was interesting that all the discussions were kind of framed that way when I hadn't really been aware of what specifically. Like, I didn't even pick up on that until just now. Maybe I was more clear when I watched it, and now I forgot.
I mean, I was joking, but I feel like there is some truth to what I said. I feel like is that he understood that Drew was controversial. He just didn't think that it was to a point where they could actually rally to get him out, and didn't take any. He probably was privy to at least some discussion of like Drew being a douchebag, and was dismissive of it. And he is apologizing for being dismissive of what ended up being the actual mood of the tribe. He's apologizing probably for misreading the seriousness of how much they didn't like him. Yeah,
sorry for taking his side on some of these things.
Sorry for not listening to you when you were clearly laying down the signs that you were unhappy with Drew, and for me to take his side, which was the incorrect thing based on your all's mood. Mm-hmm. That's what that's what I feel like he's apologizing for.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think you're probably right. So in any case, as we're heading into the duel, we have some nice, very expected, but certainly interesting. The
duel.
Well. Yes, yeah. What I was actually going to say though is just the footage before Hunahpu even comes in, of Alec being pretty sure that it's not going to be Drew, and he's looking to compete against him, like he's actually going to try to volunteer so he can do the duel against his brother. Right. Which, is just one of those things where, we know they probably asked every single person on the tribe, what would you think if it was going to be your loved one that got voted out? And so his response was, I really don't think it'll be him. And then they take that clip because, of course, we know that it is him. But at the same time, it's interesting watching Alec respond to all of this, especially given that, in the early episodes, it seemed like there was a very, very distinct older brother, younger brother difference between the two. And yet everyone else on the tribe seems to read it as they are very similar to each other.
Yeah.
Although, there could be aspects of that too. I mean, it's maybe they look so different when they're standing next to each other, but then you compare them to any other person who's not a member of their immediate family. And then you say, oh, okay, well, yeah, I get it. They do actually look pretty similar. They're not all that different in age. Anyway, though, Everybody in Coyopa is very stunned, um, because they would be. I mean, like they're not. It's kind of like they talk about they're not privy to whatever it was in the other tribe that made it go down that way. All they know is that someone who seemed like one of the stronger people in the challenges got voted out for reasons that are unknown. So, Alec assumes that it must have been because he was a big threat, which it's one of the rare, interesting times where that really wasn't it. It is actually just, I feel like we didn't even talk about this as much last time, but just the idea that it really wasn't about him being a threat, and it wasn't even, they didn't even know that he threw the challenge. It was mostly just he was a jerk, and he didn't want to listen to anybody or work with anybody.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. But it's funny how much the two brothers are alike, because Drew said almost the exact same thing on his way out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, they clearly, I'm honored because they knew I was a threat. Yeah. They thought I was a douche.
Well, it's also true that we know that that's already what was in his head, is that he was targeting, he was selecting his target, Kelly, based on thinking she was the threat. Now, I mean, we talked already a little bit about what the psychology might have been that led him to believe that she was the biggest threat, but at the same time, that is what he was thinking. So he was trying to make his play based on getting rid of the threat, and so to be surprised that he gets sent home, I could see how that would be the first conclusion you would come to, especially given that he lacked the self-awareness to realize how wrong he was rubbing everybody else on the tribe.
Yes.
So I think that's it makes sense. He has no other explanation that he is able to permeate his ego, and that's a satisfying answer that makes him feel good about getting voted out. But anyway.
But Alec assumes the same thing, and
yep. So excuse me. So Prost says, "Oh, that was a shock, and here's another one. Drop your buffs. Time for the mix-up." So the new Coyopa in the orange buffs, we've got Kelly and Dale, Missy and Baylor, John and Jacqueline, all as the three couples, and then Keith is the one single person. The new Hunapu in the blue buffs, we've got Josh and Reed as a couple, and then everybody else is a single person there. Alec, Wes, Natalie, Julie, and Jeremy. So they don't have the duel, but it's time for one more round of Survivor Prices, right? Or no, not. I guess more Deal or No Deal. In this case, it's one of those situations where it's not like bringing it up out of nowhere. It's more like we really, we need to do something. But it's also true that Probst is just feeling like, well, if you guys were eating so much and not rationing your food, that tribe probably received a benefit from that in terms of doing well at challenges, and they certainly won a lot of challenges. So why should they then be immune from the price to pay for that? And it's a little more complicated because it's a mix-up now, and half of those people weren't part of that process. But it's that's how the mix-up works. Is that you have some people switch tribes, and that means you go to their shelter, and you are now subject to whatever food they have. That's just how the game works.
Yeah.
So.
That was the first thing I thought when they identified that there was no rice, was well, no wonder that tribe's dominating. They're eating twice as much. Like, that probably, like, even in, like, not just the physical, but mental and skill games, you know, being hungry affects that, you know?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
it made a lot of sense. Now, and it's the one time when I actually wished a little bit more that they had let it play out a little bit longer. I wanted, you know, I didn't know this before, but now that I know that this was the case, I almost wanted to see what happened when they ate through all their rice. Like, I know Probst is going to go out there now, but he has to be a little bit more understanding of the situation and the fact that not everybody out there contributed to this happening.
Right.
And while he's still going to make them do something that I'm sure Probst is going to be something awesome that they're going to come up with.
My prediction is that he'll make them tear down their shelter and build a new one from scratch. That's my guess. That's my prediction, but we'll see.
That's interesting. I hadn't really made a prediction. I feel like it would have been different had it all been the same people that just plowed through the rice.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like, I feel like it could have been something as much as, like, having to forfeit a challenge or something, you know?
You know, it's interesting because the elements of what would make it a fair competition versus what makes it a good TV show are slightly at odds here, right? Because on the one hand, something like forfeiting a competition, like if it was all about the rules and just making everything fair, that might be something reasonable. But for the TV show purposes, they probably don't want to sacrifice the drama of a challenge, right? And then likewise, you know, it might be fair to make them just have to do without the food and get really hungry. But there's also the element that, you know, past seasons of Survivor have taught us that when people are really that food deprived, they get listless and boring.
Yeah. And, you know, they've got to find a way to let them eat, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like it would have been more at odds had it been all of the people who did overconsume, and the fact that it's not, and some people potentially are going to be unfairly punished who've already been eating less than the other people because they were saving their rice. Yeah. So I did kind of want to see it play out after that. You know, more than just the dynamics of the different tribes. That's the piece I wanted to see is what happened when they actually ran out, you know? Because clearly they were close enough that they had to bring it up, you know?
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I am sure that it'll be something to the effect of they'll have to sacrifice something at camp. And who knows, maybe it even would be, you know, like my guess would be that they wouldn't have to forfeit a challenge just for the reason of not wanting to miss a dramatic challenge for the show. But that, you know, that might still be the way they want to do it. Like they could, you know, they could take a challenge and make it like a reward challenge instead of immunity. You know, to say, you know, this tribe has forfeited immunity, but we'll still do the challenge for something else. You know, they could do that. But again, that's also something that would potentially, because of the mix-up, it would potentially end up punishing someone who really didn't have anything to do with that decision.
Yeah, I feel like that choice is going to be less likely based on the current situation. That I feel like they only would have considered something as drastic as like forfeiting a challenge if it was all people who were winning challenges because they had overconsumed their rice. Then that almost makes sense. You know, okay, you have won all these challenges because you overconsumed. Now you're either gonna have to try to keep winning challenges and starve, or you're gonna have to just forfeit one in order to get food to continue to be good at the others. I don't think that's gonna happen. because you said it would unfairly punish people who had nothing to do with this.
In some ways, though, that still happens. Like if they have to give up their shelter or something, that's still punishing all of the people who are there now, some of whom weren't over there.
Which is, yeah, whatever happens, that's going to be a part. Like, there are going to be people unfairly punished for it. But it's one thing to be unfairly punished in having to lose your shelter, and another thing in potentially getting voted out because you got mixed up on a tribe that happened to eat all the food. You know.
It's
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm distracted by my dog under my desk who's digging on the carpet. So anyway, we'll have to see how that plays out because obviously, Jeff didn't want to go through everything right now. I wonder if they he wanted to be able to they wanted to plan it out a bit more as opposed to, it's one thing if he's going to say no. Yeah.
With the other ones, it was all right for Jeff just to think of something on the spot. Like this one, what he thought of on the spot is, oh my God, this is too good to just think of something right now. Let's plan this out. So.
Well, and it's just this whole element of everyone thought, oh, this tribe is so good, they're so strong, and then we just discover it's because they were just going full out with no consideration of the long game. And not only that, but they were also the tribe that at the same time they lost their flint and tried to bargain with that with that. Then they also tried to bargain when they found the flint again, and now the rice too. It just starts feeling like, oh, these guys really weren't that strong at all, and they should not just be. The game does not want to reward people playing like that.
Right.
If they just say, oh no, here's more rice, consequence free, what does that tell all the people who have been rationing it?
Yeah, and for future seasons, like people will be like, oh, well, there's the trick. Just eat way more rice than the other team and deal with whatever minimal consequence there is. Like there's got to be a serious consequence.
Yeah.
Where it's going to set a precedent for future seasons, because whether or not, I think we're all in agreement that it was likely the reason why they were winning more. Say it wasn't. Say they truly are a little bit better at all the different challenges, and that was just a piece that helped them. That's not how people see it, and that's not the message you're going to be sending if there's not a strong precedent. You're going to have tribes who are going to say, here's what we need to do. I feel like it's still going to, it potentially is still going to be a thing. Because let's say you go on Survivor next season or the next season after having watched this. You might say, you know what we could do? We could risk overeating right now to stay strong so that we have more numbers going into the merge or the mix-up, knowing that, okay, some of us are going to might have to deal with whatever this consequence is, but some of us won't. No matter what the consequence is, there may be somebody who suggests that next season.
Yeah. And it wouldn't even necessarily be a terrible strategy.
No, I'm not. I wouldn't say it's a calculated risk,
Because who knows? If even something like tearing down the shelter, that's it's a lot of work to rebuild it, but it's also probably one of those situations where it's like you have your first shelter that you build, and then you have the shelter you would build if you had to build it a second time, right? So you have to do the extra work, but you might end up with a better shelter out of the end of it anyway because you've learned the lessons from the first time.
Yeah, and you might go into that season and say, you know what, are we willing to risk that being a consequence if we need to barter for more rice? At the expense of not losing our people? At the early parts of the game where you can form like some pretty strong alliances? Yeah, that's a risk worth taking. So it's going to have to be a pretty severe consequence because of how much like this could affect people.
Yes, I agree. It'll have to be severe consequence. Here, that is what that was, by the way.
Yeah. They might take Squeaky toys away.
Yeah. Well, it's like I always forget, and then she gets bored while we're talking and goes and looks for it. I don't put it up on my desk. Anyway, though, so as both tribes go back to their camp, we have a little bit, some of the new Hunahpu people are frustrated to discover how little food is left. We have Jeremy worried that his strong position has been substantially weakened, and he's right, at least until he is able to sort of forge new alliances with some of the new people. And then we have the surprise that, like, it's fine, I guess, but it's certainly unexpected of hearing Josh and Reed say that we knew they were both Christian when we read it in their bios for the pre-show, but they're remaining abstinent until marriage. And it's like, okay. If that's what they want to do, then good luck to them, but that's certainly not, it's unexpected.
Yeah, and I really thought a long time about, like, why did that make it on TV? Like, why is that in the final edit?
My guess is just because it's so unexpected. It's unusual.
Yeah. Because, it seems ultimately irrelevant to the game.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe Josh and Reed go far in the game, and it's part of our, like, want us, like, the producers wanting us to, like, get to know them and understand them, and not necessarily maybe root for them, maybe not root for them, but just give them more of them as people, as opposed to just the strategy, because they're going to go far through the game.
Right. Well, Josh in particular is getting a lot of screen time. I bet you he goes far. In addition to, that's just sort of the editorial seems promising, but he also actually seems really smart and like he knows what he's doing. Reed, I have a little bit less of a beat on, but, I certainly don't dislike him. But Josh definitely gets a lot of screen time of him saying smart things.
Dalton Ross actually poked some fun at that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, in his blog or whatever, his EW article.
Yeah. Recap.
He referred to it as, since it appears that Reed is contractually obligated to never speak more than 3 sentences, Josh has to explain all about their relationship. So he's identified, obviously, the same thing, is that Josh talks a lot to the camera. Reed doesn't ever talk about anything. So and why I thought it was amusing in this is that we're now having some revelations about their relationship, but we're only hearing it from one side, even though they're both on the same tribe. Like, they're both there. They could both weigh in to the camera about what's going on, and we only still get Josh's. So maybe Reed is really boring on camera, or Josh is a significant player as far as they know at this point, going into the edits. So. Well,
yeah, I think when they're doing the edits, they know, if not the final winner, they certainly know if people make it close to the end.
Yeah, I always forget, like, how much the lag is, like, at what point, like, in reality right now, where are they? Have they already got to the final 2 or 3 and they're back? Or
that would be my guess. Maybe they're making final tweaks right down to the last bit, but I would say they probably have at least a rough cut of almost all the episodes by now. I would expect, but I don't really know.
I wasn't even saying. I was saying, like, physically, where is the game? I don't remember in the filming. Like, while we're watching, where are the actual contestants?
I'm pretty sure. Well, I'm pretty sure they are all back now. They're all home, but contractually obligated to not say what happened.
Okay.
Because I'm pretty sure they do watch the episodes as they come out. And the exception would be someone doing the back-to-back seasons like we've sometimes seen.
That's what I was thinking. I was trying to remember where I knew that they hadn't seen that, and that's where it was.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think the typical thing is that they go and they record all of the stuff for the actual game, and then they come back home and are basically told, you will not discuss the end result with anybody upon pain of being sued for a lot of money. And I think that's what it probably comes down to. Oh man, she's finding the other squeaky toy. Anyway, I think I do still like Josh and Reed, and I like both of them as a couple, and I was, again, I guess, surprised, although certainly they are entitled to do whatever relationship thing that they want to do.
All right, so I pulled this up. This season finished filming mid-July, so yeah, at this point, I mean, they've definitely rough cut everything, and they already know who the final people are. So, this could be good evidence for Josh, being that they give him a ton of screen time.
Yeah. So, in the meantime, over at the new Coyopa, John and Jacqueline are thrilled to be back on the same tribe as each other. I couldn't help but think that they may want to cut down on the PDA a little bit, just because it was, at least in the edit, it seems like they were doing it a lot, like right there in the middle of everybody else, which, we had that funny bit where it was, I think it was Baylor who said, "Oh, it's cute," and she's making a face that didn't match the words, in my opinion.
This is a time when the edit probably did exactly what it's supposed to do, which is take something that wasn't okay. So it wasn't necessarily happening all the time, but it was happening enough to be a noticeable thing that was uncomfortable for people, and so they edited it in a way that within a 10-second window, we can feel how uncomfortable they are to have to sit through it for 2 days.
Yeah.
They may not do it all day, every day. They're doing it enough over that time span that it makes people kind of feel like they're doing it a lot. So the edit condenses that so that us on a snapshot can understand what's going on. I feel like that's what happened. I don't think they were actually making out all the time. But I feel like they're making out enough that the edit isn't giving us untrue information. They're helping us understand the feeling that everybody else got, even though that was only, however much time they were doing it, it was frequent enough to bother people.
So in the meantime, I feel like that's about all we got over there before we jumped back over onto New Hunahpu. But we had Alec talking about being happy about his new tribe because it was, he thinks it's more athletic. And he also talks in some stuff that I thought was pretty interesting of saying he could kind of tell that Drew was not at his best, which I thought was interesting. An interesting piece of the puzzle there, especially just because certainly, he's getting less food than he would typically, I would imagine. But it's also like we know that tribe was getting more food than the other tribe, so, and we also know that Drew was being kind of lazy, like he wasn't doing that much work. But it might also be some of that personality stuff that Alec was talking about, just in saying Drew doesn't seem to have ever internalized this idea that something can be hard, but it won't kill you.
Right.
Something being difficult is not the end of the road. And I thought that was kind of interesting.
That was interesting.
In the meantime, we have Jeremy and Natalie talking strategy. they think Alec is pretty much just like Drew was, and so that means that they want to play to his ego if they're going to have him join them instead of joining with Josh and Reed. And Jeremy uses the firefighters surround and drown approach to try to convince Alec to side with them, which I thought was a weird metaphor. I mean, like I guess it's visually interesting and ties into the firefighters, but at the same time, I sort of feel like an imperfect fit for direct application to the game, I think. Unless, I guess, all they mean is that they're just going to try to be around him all the time and keep reinforcing it.
Yeah, that's how I felt it meant, is that the metaphor meant that if you're fighting a fire with that method, what you're trying to do is use a lot of people to get, a constant stream of water on it from a lot of different places. So you move that to the game, you're using a lot of people to give a constant message from a lot of different places.
I'm just getting a treat here.
That's all right. I just did the same thing. Got up. As opposed to like a full frontal assault. What he was trying to say is, instead of all of us sitting down and like going after him, which would be the similar to all the firefighters standing in one place with all the hoses spraying in one direction. We're going to come at him from multiple angles so that he's constantly getting our message, as opposed to like being assaulted from one area. That I actually thought it was cool a little bit.
Oh yeah, so I guess now that we've talked through it a little bit, I feel like I get it more. Maybe I was just unable to completely let go of just the water visual of it.
Yeah.
But so anyway, meanwhile we have some of the less exciting part of the episode, which is arguing about rice, because Missy and Baylor think they should be making more rice, which is just the interesting parallel to the other tribe, which had been saying clearly they were making too much rice. So.
Yep. So we have to wonder how much Missy was involved in that, or whether she was, whether she came to this tribe and was just taking what their situation was and implanting it on the new one, or whether she was actually the instigator at the other one and just nobody ever stood up to her.
Yeah. It's interesting. I thought what I thought was really cool and why it was kind of a shame that she ended up going is it's not that I didn't like Dale exactly, but I sort of feel like he was really the one that was doing stuff to get himself voted out. Kelly, I thought, was the one who was playing smarter, and yet she ended up just getting voted out as a way to punish Dale, I guess. I
think that's just part of the deal in these types of seasons, is that
but I liked the bit where she can see her dad getting madder and madder at Baylor and Missy, and she's the one that kind of tries to pull him aside and say, listen, this is not about whether you're right or they're right, because clearly you're right, but the drama that you will create in camp by continuing to press this will hurt you more than them. And it would be better to just let them do it, even though it means costing everybody, getting, there's a price to pay for it, but you let them be the ones to take the weight of that decision, instead of you coming across like the one who's sticking their nose in everybody else's business, who is telling everybody how to do things, he's bossy, and especially if Baylor already doesn't like him. I liked her kind of trying to talk him off the ledge that way.
I did. Yeah. I was just continuing to think forward to like whether I could think of why, because I kept saying I feel like there was some reason that I just never thought of as to why it was Kelly versus Dale.
Mm-hmm.
It's not coming. I don't see any reason why they would have just picked her other than like they really wanted to punish him and then like revel in it, or
Yeah, well, they were going to try to split the vote, I guess, but why with the balance towards her?
yeah, why would you go the other way? And then she would
Unless
only.
unless it was sort of like because they talked about potentially flushing an idol, so maybe if they thought Dale had it, that he would be more likely to use it on himself, and so they were going to try to get him to play it, but then still have the votes for Kelly. That might have been why. I mean, I can't really think of any other reason.
Extreme benefit of the doubt, considering how they played. So.
Well, yeah, I'm just trying to think. They must have had some motivation, so I was just trying to think what that might have been.
Maybe.
They did actually talk about the idea of if, like, there's a bit where John and Jacqueline are talking about what they're going to do. They're basically saying, like, if they decide to side with Dale and Kelly, they're going to vote out Baylor. If they decide to go with Missy and Baylor, they will split the vote between Kelly and Dale because they want to flush an idol. They did actually say that.
Yes.
So maybe they picked Kelly just because they thought that Dale was more likely to play the idol if anyone was going to.
That would make sense because he's been to exile, right?
Yeah.
And she's not.
I believe that's correct, yes. Yeah.
So as to, if you have to go by that idols are typically played by who physically possesses them,
Mm-hmm.
he's more likely to physically possess one. So therefore, you should be more concerned with like trying to get. Although, wouldn't you want to target the guy with the idol, and then if he uses it, have the backup go to Kelly?
Well, I mean,
maybe it goes back to maybe that scene that we saw of her calming Dale down was actually more damning to her than we think. Maybe they see her as the one that's the stronger gamer, and if they just want to be done with that group, get her out first. Dale's easy. If you do Dale, she is more skilled at potentially getting in and messing up what they're trying to do.
See, I was actually just thinking back on it. I don't think Dale has been to exile. I feel like they said something like he had, but I'm trying to think when that would have been. Because the first episode was Val went with Keith to exile. Second episode was Julie went with Jeremy. No, excuse me, Julie went with Jeremy. Julie won, and then Jeremy and John Rocker went, where they had their whole, the infamous promise.
Mm-hmm.
In episode 3, let's see, Wes competed against his dad and won. So Keith went, and Josh went with him, because that was the whole no spooning thing. And so episode 4, the duel was John and Jacqueline. John wins and goes with Drew. Does Amanda find that interesting? So the point is, though, Dale has not been to exile, but neither has Kelly. Now, that said, it's also possible that there was some roundabout way of so-and-so was allies with the other so-and-so who maybe found the clue. I don't know.
I would have heard some of that. I mean...
Yeah, like, in retrospect, I'm not sure why they suspected there might be an idol there. I kind of blew past it in the actual episode, but now I can't remember why they would have thought that.
So,
especially since they seemed more concerned about it with Dale and Kelly than with, Missy and Baylor.
right. So, it doesn't sound like they have a whole lot of clue what's going on. So, It's hard to put a lot of faith into why they may or may not have chosen Kelly over Dale. It might have just been a thing. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know. But it also probably doesn't matter very much because they did split the vote. So I mean, the only reason to do that would be if they were worried about an idol, right?
Right.
So for whatever reason, they thought there might be an idol in play, so they split the vote, and it might have been half arbitrary why they got rid of Kelly instead of Dale. Or maybe it was even left over from John targeting Kelly with Drew last time. Like he was worried that she was going to hold it against him or something.
That actually could be part of it, is that we've already been down the road with getting rid of Kelly. Let's just continue that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's almost like the path of like least resistance. Like, we already voted this way, so let's just continue to vote this way. You know?
Yeah. Well, and then also like the idea of what if
or I mean, maybe John like truly believed that Kelly should have gone last time, and that was a condition of them joining Baylor and Missy, was that of the two, we go Kelly first because that's who I've been wanting to get out.
Well, it could also...
You know what? That would be why we wouldn't have seen it, because that would have been the indication that they were willing to join that group, because we couldn't see why they chose one group or the other. And if their reasoning for choosing was, if you let me vote for Kelly again because I truly believe she should have been gone, we wouldn't have seen those discussions. That could be the explanation. You know, John could have indicated that.
Tying into that might just be the idea that of the two, Kelly seems more likely to be the one who could actually try to do something in the game proactive, whereas Dale's kind of there. He doesn't seem to be engaging with the strategic part of the game very much.
I said that like 5 minutes ago.
Okay, sorry.
I'm just teasing you. I said that was one of the reasons Kelly would be more likely to operate. Like, if they want to get rid of both of them, you need to get rid of Kelly first, because she's more likely to change the dynamic than Dale is. Yeah. So I agree with you. I was just teasing you.
Yeah, okay. Well, so anyway, I think we've probably solved why Kelly then instead of Dale.
Yep.
Because it wasn't really about just Dale's annoying, so let's get rid of him. It was a little bit more involved. But so anyway, poor Hunahpu still doesn't have their rice because Probst didn't want to. Oh, you know what? Actually, I guess it wasn't until after the immunity challenge that they had that whole negotiation. So it was
we had the discussion and we realized that we were talking about the part where they didn't have the rice, but the actual negotiation wasn't until later. Right,
because before that they were still talking about having the lack of food. Reed was worried about it. The only part of the food discussion other than the part with Probst that I really found interesting was the idle discussion of whether or not it would be worth trying to catch and eat a vulture. And I think it was Wes that was basically saying, not worth it, dude. You don't even want to bother with that. He's probably right. I mean, it's also a situation where, you're, if you're desperate, it probably wouldn't kill you, but at the same time, it's also not going to be like a chicken, I would think.
No. It's like rotten meat in Minecraft.
Yes, it's just like that. So I guess it was interesting too, though, that it was Alec who was the person who is a big proponent of trying to bargain with Probst for more food, just because.
He's very much like Drew. I mean, they correctly identified that they're very.
Yeah, and I kind of liked the apathy that the previous Hunahpu tribe members, the remaining ones, kind of approached that with the whole thing of like, all right, don't see how it can hurt us to ask at this point, because this was not like trying to return the flint. This is like something we really need. So I guess that brings us to the challenge. What did you think of that, like shaking thing where they had to shake the barrel on top of the big pole to knock the beanbags out?
At first, I didn't really care, but then when I realized that it was something that you actually had to be good at, I was like, that's an interesting addition to it.
Mm-hmm. I kind of just liked it as an interesting visual. So I don't know, just I like when they have new mechanics. I don't remember seeing that before.
No, I don't either. And like I said, the fact that one tribe failed at it made it more interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just an extra thing they had to do. It was actually a thing that took some skill.
Right.
So.
Well, and so Hunahpu wins, and then it's just like the last time they tried to negotiate this whole thing of you waited until you won and now you want to negotiate. It's like you're trying to leverage the fact that you won. But basically this time it's a little different in the sense that, as we discussed, their question really is, it's like, well, if they really have no food left, that's not really good for anybody. Except maybe the people on the other tribe. But so I liked, we kind of talked about that already. So heading back to Koyopa for the remainder of the episode, because they're the ones that are going to have to vote someone out. We didn't get a lot from Keith, but I did like the brief little bit of him just saying, listen, I was the obvious target as the only single person, so I'm really happy that two of the couples don't like each other.
Yep.
I thought that was pretty great, because not only if there's one couple that becomes a problem, not only that's not one but two people you might vote out before me. And any number of things could happen by then.
Well, yeah, and once one couple is gone, say you're playing with sort of the short-term mentality of that you're not going to have a merge and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So you've got a set of four, two couples. You've got Keith as the fifth, and then you've got the other couple that they don't like. So in Keith's position, yeah, they could go 1, 2, 3 with Keith being third, but the reality is if they get down to that and they think, oh wow, if Keith goes, it just becomes us versus them, and whichever couple wins immunity, or not wins immunity because it wouldn't be a winning immunity, then it would be a tie. Mm-hmm. So they want to get Keith while he's still the swing vote, truly the swing vote. You'd want him to be there to break the other couple so that you could continue going on. Yeah. So if this was the final 7, Keith would be safe until the final 3. So because he'd be able to make the decision of which couple to go to pick off not just this first set of 2, but then the next set of 2.
Yeah. Although, you know what that just made me think of is, imagine going to a Final 4 that's 2 intact couples.
Wow.
Although I suppose it could always just play out in a boring way, meaning it is a 2-2 tie and then a 2-2 tie, and then they have to do tiebreaker fire making or something. I mean, I suppose that's probably the most realistic outcome, as opposed to, the idea that one would turn on their loved one. I don't know, although at the same time, if you have a loved one on the jury, it's probably a pretty sure thing vote, right?
I mean, that's a conversation that you could have where you could sit down and say, look, which of us is more likely to win this game?
Mm-hmm.
It's me or you, so therefore you should understand why I'm going to vote with them to get to the final three, or I would understand why you vote. You should vote for me so that you can go.
You could even spin that in the final tribal council really well, I think, just to say, we discussed it as a couple, and we didn't want to take the risk that, it would happen in an uncontrolled way. We would have liked to both be at the end together, but this way, we were able to ensure that the one of us that we thought had the best chance to win got to be there. I don't know. At the same time, the allure of having your loved one there in the final tribal council, that would be pretty hard to, that would be a nice thing to have if you could swing it.
It would, because you've got, theoretically, say it's a set of three, you'd have a 2/3 chance of winning.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, though, like, if you're in that position and you're willing to be the one to, like, take the bullet so that the other one can go,
mm-hmm.
There's, depending on how the game goes down, there's potential that people could have, split feelings between the other two people, and that anybody who, like, wants to vote for that style of gameplay could split it accidentally between
It could definitely, because if the couple is too identifiable as a couple, more so than as two individual players, then you're right. I mean, they could end up just splitting the votes. But anyway, that's all future speculation. In any case, Keith is happy that two of the couples don't like each other. It's mostly, I think, Dale that doesn't like Missy and Baylor, and then Kelly is kind of, dragged into that, although we got a little bit of hint that Kelly was not a big fan of Missy either, necessarily, from the previous Hunapu tribe. But so clearly, though, both the Missy and Baylor couple and the Dale and Kelly couple recognize John and Jacqueline as the middle ground, and they're both lobbying. And it puts John and Jacqueline in a position of basically making that decision. And so, I thought they did fine as the swing votes in this context. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. We've certainly talked lots of times about people who do it well, people who do it poorly. I think they were kind of, I was going to say right down the middle, but I think even more a little positive than that. Just, I don't want to make it sound like it's equally good versus bad. It's more, I think, just it's mildly good. But seems like Jacqueline was wary of both Baylor and Dale. Those two seemed to be the ones she was concerned about. And of course, those are the two that she knows better, having been on that tribe with them. So I guess it makes sense that those would be the two she's focused on. But so yeah, as we're going into the final tribal council, what we're told is that John and Jacqueline, which I started abbreviating in my notes as JJ. If JJ want to side with Dale and Kelly, they would be voting for Baylor. If not, they're going to split the vote. So what So basically, the plan then is that we have Missy, and we should also, I guess, emphasize that they were telling both couples that they were siding with them. So there was none of this, nope, we've decided you guys are going to be the ones to go, and that's how it is. It was both of these side couples thought that John and Jacqueline had agreed with them.
Yeah.
So, I had it open, but I was just going to confirm the votes, but I think it's pretty straightforward. In terms of the 2 votes for Baylor had to have been Dale and Kelly. And then the remaining votes, we got 3 for Kelly and 2 for Dale, meaning that Kelly went. And I was a little bit bummed just because I kind of felt like of the 3 possible people that might get voted out, I kind of liked her the most.
Yeah, I know that. I felt the same way, but it's probably also part of, like we said, why the decision was made is that we liked her the most because she had the most potential in the game. Probably why they picked her.
Yep. Yep. So that's how the game goes sometimes. You know, things are not always fair, and they're not even always about you directly, necessarily. So next time, we have Dale with his fake idol. He's going to try to parlay that into something with John, which I am very pleased to hear. Just because there was that random little bit from earlier in the season where he just saw this funny looking thing on the water cover and it's like, hey, that looks like it could be a something. Maybe I'll just grab that and pretend it is a something.
Now he's going to take that forward.
Yep.
Yeah, I think next episode has a lot of potential because we're going to have Dale and his fake idol, and we're going to have Prost's
the stiff penalty.
Stiff penalty. So I'm excited about both. So.
Yep. In her final words, Kelly basically blamed her dad. You know, not in a mean way, but just saying she thinks that if her dad had gotten along better with other people, it might not have gone down this way. And she's probably right.
She's probably right. Yeah.
But as we kind of talked through it too, though, there were other reasons why they might have decided to side with Missy and Baylor as well.
Yep.
Yep. But so I think that does it for this episode. Do you have any closing thoughts for this episode?
No, I'm just really looking forward to this week's.
Yeah, I'm hoping for a little bit more action this week because I feel like, although it wasn't boring exactly, just all the talk about Rice got a little bit old for me in this one. So, I'm looking for more to happen than to just have everybody saying, oh, there's rice. How much rice? That much rice? No, too much rice. Not enough rice. Rice. But anyway, we'll see.
Rice if they're throwing it out.
Yeah. I liked that John had actually referenced that earlier in the season. But anyway, remember everybody, if you're listening to this or hearing this, you can find the podcast notes at christianaellis.com. And we'll be back for the next episode of Survivor San Juan del Sur. So thank you for listening.